My name is Louise Bennett and I am the Chief Executive of Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a Deputy Lieutenant for the West Midlands and I am also the High Sheriff in nomination for the West Midlands. Now, some of you might not know that this particular policy hour is just one in a whole series of policy hours that we have been running throughout COVID-19. And we've had some amazing input from police commissioners, members of parliament, directors of public health, and we're going to do exactly the same today in terms of having some amazing input, because we have with us Nick Abell, the chairman of our Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and also Paula Deas, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of the Coventry Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and also, by the way, a good colleague and a friend of mine. So be nice. So we're going to talk about the economy, we're going to talk about the landscape, and we're going to talk about how we, I guess, move ourselves forward as Coventry and Warwickshire and businesses and business leaders as we continue to face up what has been the most probably unprecedented challenge of our time, which of course is COVID-19. And we are about to face up to what will be Brexit come January 2021. Now, again, thank you all for joining us. If you want to ask questions, if you want to give us your thoughts and your input, then please do so, and do that by the chat box. And where I can, I'll pick up as many questions or thoughts or input that I can, and I'll feed them off to either Nick or to Paula a little bit later on. But if Paula and Nick don't mind, I just wanted to set a little bit of context in terms of perhaps how we might create a conversation over the next hour. And the context is about the economy. As I see it, I think as we all see, the economy clearly is contracting, probably 10 to 15%. We know that. Unemployment is rising. In fact, I was listening to the Prime Minister's speech today, and I was listening to some presenters earlier today, and they were talking about unemployment rising by something like 100,000 individuals every month. So huge numbers. But in all of that, we know that confidence is key. And when I talk about confidence, I think about it in terms of both consumer confidence and business confidence. Consumer confidence is important because to stimulate consumer confidence is to get us all spending the little money that we do have, and that helps the economy go round. But of course, business confidence is key. Businesses need to feel that they can plan forward, that they can have the confidence to invest in growing your business, in our people, in our skills, in our infrastructure. So confidence is absolutely fundamental to how we move ourselves forward. So when people ask me about the levelling up agenda, and the levelling up phrase is something I hear a lot lately when we hear government officials talk. When people ask me about the levelling up agenda, I guess Paula and Nick, I think about it in two ways. One, and Paula knows this, one is that I think about it in terms of being very place-based, in terms of local communities, in terms of all of us today are very passionate and committed about Coventry and Warwickshire and its businesses and its individuals and its communities. And what we want to do is make sure that we address any inequalities in our communities. And what we want to do is make sure that Coventry and Warwickshire continues to be the amazing success it has been. But also when I think about levelling up, I think about how we as businesses, and you will get this, Nick, because you're a businessman, how we as businesses have got to trade ourselves out of COVID-19. It's the only way forward. It's the only way forward for the UK economy. We have to trade ourselves forward, and all of us as business people and business leaders have to think about how our business has got to adapt, change, morph, diversify, do whatever it takes to continue to be resilient and to look forward to growth and moving our businesses forward out of COVID-19 and moving ourselves through what will be Brexit. So that's how I think about the future. I'm opportunistic actually about the future, and probably more so because I have the pleasure of working here in Coventry and Warwickshire, and I think if anybody can do it in this country other than the South, who gets all the attention, London, if anybody can do it, I know that Coventry and Warwickshire can, because it is a mini England. it's diversified, it's got all sectors, it's got all sizes of business, it's got beautiful rural areas, lovely town centres, a fantastic city, we've got City of Culture, we've got some of Commonwealth coming our way. So I just feel opportunistic about Coventry and Warwickshire, but I'm not complacent. So I know we've also got an awful lot to do. So is that okay, Paula and Nick, if that's the context? Yeah?
Very
So
fine with me, Louise.
Yeah.
thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to Paula, and she's going to tell us a little bit about our enterprise partnership, which is fabulous, by the way, a little bit about our enterprise partnership and about how our enterprise partnership are also thinking about how we move ourselves forward. Over to you, Paula. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Louise, and good afternoon, everybody who's on the webinar. As Louise said, my name is Paula Deas, and I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership. Have been with the partnership from day one. In fact, was part of, I think, Louise's lobbying team as we headed down to London to get ourselves to be in one of the first tranche of 25 to get ourselves established as Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, and that was probably 2012, so you know, some time ago now, but we have stood the test of time. The jury still continues to be out on LEPs, but we never let that bother us. We just kind of get on with it on a day-to-day basis and get on with the job in hand, which is around creating opportunities and removing barriers to enable businesses to grow in a Coventry and Warwickshire context. And I just would like to respond to Louise's comments, particularly around the situation that we find ourselves in, before I kind of get into the bit that we have set ourselves in terms of a reset approach. You know, and I guess this is your moment where you kind of want to convey just exactly how you feel about living and operating in the times of a pandemic, which, you know, I guess flash yourself back, you know, recall programs that you think you've watched on the television, one of which really resonates to me, a program called Years and Years, and you think that's never going to happen, and you find yourself in this parallel universe of a world where I don't recall, you know, people being able to genuinely say that they've experienced this level of uncertainty across health, wealth, social, digital platforms, and every sphere of our living world, in all parts of the world, in people's lives and businesses, relationships and decisions, is manifestly affected by this situation we find ourselves in. So that's the magnitude, and I think, you know, it's important that, you know, every day you do try and remind yourself that you're not on your own trying to sort this out. It's affecting everybody. But for us as the LEP, we are an agency predominantly trying to work with others to sort out the aspect around the wealth, the economy, and protecting livelihoods of individuals through business growth. So for us, we've stood ready from day one, building on the success of our own LEP, in terms of always being ranked in the top 3 ever since we've been judged by government out of the 38 LEPs that exist, and we've wanted to provide direction, support, advice, intervention, and certainly under Nick's leadership, who magnanimously stood up and said, yes, I'll be the interim chair, and then a week later, before you know it, I think he's thinking, don't think I quite anticipated being the interim and now the fully fledged chair in these scenarios. So we have wanted to, you know, and at the start of the crisis, very much being in response mode, doing all the kinds of things that you'd expect an economic development agency to do. But I guess if you were to ask us now through the board, you know, where we see ourselves, it's probably to hang back to some of the things that Louise has said about both opportunistic and realistic. We have come up with, and it is just about to go to board for a final verification next week, something which we've called our reset strategy. It's got 6 pillars. None of those pillars will be a surprise to you, but we have blended them together. They've been business-led. They've been based on things that businesses tell us they need solutions for, and they are a blend to try and help address some of those opportunities, but genuinely tackle and respond to some of the very, very real risks that exist as a result of the pandemic. So I'll just flick you quickly through the 6 without, you don't need material, but just kind of headlines on 6. The first one is about our good jobs and levelling up opportunities that Louise has talked about. That's just really about making sure that any job that is available, people are able to connect into it, whether that's a new job, whether somebody faces redundancy, or whether that's a business trying to promote a vacancy. And one of the things we're doing on that is we'll have a brand new mechanism on our Find It in CW portal, which helps match vacancies to employers. The second pillar is about leading innovation. I'll let Nick talk more about that later, but you'll know that we're at the forefront of battery development and technology. We've got a gigafactory submission in that we're absolutely adamant to government we're the right place to land that investment. We've also ironed out in one of the pillars that we are absolutely focused on green, sustainable future. That can take a number of different forms. Something that we've done very specifically about sustainability is in transport. So we've funded quite a lot of cycling networks, and that again is to try and look at alternative forms of transport, whether that's from Camden to Binley in Coventry or Kenilworth to Leamington in the county. We've very much tried to back that kind of sustainable future through cycling. The fourth pillar is around bold approaches to enterprise. We've got a really, really vibrant digital and creative business group. Hugely have been pushing the needs of freelancers, looking at what the gaps are for freelancers in terms of gaps of government provision. Again, we recognise that that is going to be a new model of enterprise going forward as the economy restructures post-pandemic. Our fifth pillar is around reimagining communities and forging global connections. We've got tons of stuff under there, lots of capital work, but just to pick a couple, got a huge investment that we've given certainly through previous funding, but future funding through the GBF for transforming Nuneaton. As Louise said, the revitalisation of town centres is going to be absolutely key, and transforming Nuneaton is prime in that. We've also got a really, it's small but an important scheme again around town and smaller town centres trying to reinvent themselves. We've got something called a North Warwickshire Art Challenge, and what we tried to do with that is to get towns to think about different ways in which art can help to be an attraction to increase footfall. Small fund, but we're hopeful that that can do some really good stuff with it. And then finally, a very big pillar called transforming infrastructure, whether that's transport, whether it's digital, whether it's buildings. We've got massive amounts of investment, certainly through the GBF funding that we've just called Getting Building Funding, shouldn't perhaps just paraphrase. And a good example in there is a big commitment towards the Very Light Rail scheme that we're going to hopefully see developed from its research base to really genuinely transform public transport methods beyond something like we normally are used to, like the trams in Birmingham. We think we've got a brand new model here that will do something very different. So I'll stop there around the reset. What I would really stress is that this reset work has been phenomenally led by Nick, and I'm not just saying that because he's on the call and he's my chair, but Nick with Marion, with business group director leads from the board, have quite literally pushed ideas around, excuse the pun, from pillar to post, and have, genuinely, week in, week out, we have repeatedly met to come up with things, to set a plan, which we know is going to be probably very much focused on the immediate, but sets us some really strong foundations to get into the medium term, as and when government are more in a position to tell us about the kinds of investment that they could make once they're kind of out of this, what is obviously a very serious issue around dealing with real-time, quick fiscal decisions that they're having to make. So if I stop there, I don't know whether that's enough for everybody. Happy to take questions if you want to ask me questions, or if Nick, I've missed things, then please feel free to add or correct.
I've got quite a few questions coming in, if that's okay, before we invite Nick to comment. Although Nick, equally, if you want to help, as I will, help answer some of these questions on, let's have a go. Let's see what we can do. The first one that came in was, just to explain the enterprise partnership a little bit more, Paula, how do
Yeah.
you actually go about engaging businesses? How do
Okay.
businesses feel they've got a voice on the left?
Okay, so in terms of the way we're structured, we're a board of 20, Nick the chair, divided by private, public and education. A whole host of people that are on that board, including representation from both universities at the VC level. We've got Sean Farnell from Burgess and Bullock. We've got, crikey, how terrible is that? We've got a whole load. We've got Jess Jeatley, who's a new board director. She's representing retail. Marion Plant, who's now a private sector director, but is from the college. We've got Helen Peters from Shakespeare's England. So we're well represented across all the sectors, as well as Nick Spencer from Jaguar Land Rover, who's also a key member of the board.
How can you forget Sarah?
And Sarah Windrum, of course, who is a very active FSB and chamber member, of course. So I think I've covered off everybody.
No, that's good.
I've passed the test.
Yeah.
So the group, in effect, that board then basically is kind of, it oversees a group, and our biggest part of the interface with business engagement is through the Growth Hub. So that's our subsidiary company, and there are account managers that reach out to business on a daily basis, and they've been our response team, and they're also our go-to in a non-pandemic environment around business growth, business development. That's led by Craig. It's kind of got a sub-board that is set and led by Martin Hollingsworth, who's a former board director actually, and former employee of Jaguar Land Rover, and he's also I think you're a member of that subsidiary board as well, Louise, along with both local authorities. That in itself has been a really important entity in responding to the crisis. Since March, Craig tells me over 3,000 interactions have been made with businesses, and in effect, out of that 3,000, they are currently in the process of managing, I think it's just over 1,000 substantive discussions from their group of account managers with partners. And that's the key about the Growth Hub. It's not the doer, it's the glue that kind of almost connects businesses to the different agencies, whether that's through chamber services, whether that's through something that they might require as a national product from funding, or whether it's skills, or whether it's premises, research and development. So the Growth Hub, I would say, is the main vehicle, but then perhaps the other role and the other way in which we also engage is through our business group functions, which are what I refer to in terms of developing strategy, and they are board director led. So we have an SME business group led by Sean, the digital and creative group led by Sarah, Marion Plant leads the skills group. We've got a couple of other, what I would call enabler groups led by local authorities around transport and infrastructure and planning and housing, led by the city and county sort of respectively. And then we've also got a tourism group that's led by Helen Peters. And probably as a result of those groups reconfiguring in the last couple of months, there is probably a community there of around 300 individuals when you add that up. So it's it's fragmented in some ways, but through the work of the reset strategy, we've seen a huge amount of cross fertilization, and that's been a real benefit. And it's almost kind of like, you know, sometimes you need a good crisis to get people to sort of think a little bit more laterally. I mean, if it hadn't, really wished it hadn't been something quite as deep as this, but that has been one of the outcomes of getting the reset strategy together. And then finally, the other point that I would make about our engagement, and it's a kind of a question around our roles, and I've sort of kind of in my head thought, you know, hopefully I've described an economic leadership role, a doer role through the hub, and an activist role securing funding. The networker role is something that I think, you know, the LEP, through its champions and its place board, has tried to provide some kind of constant since we've all gone into this virtual world. You know, every 2 months, and with a couple of others extras thrown in as well, we have tried to provide some kind of safe place for businesses to network in a virtual sense. You know, try and attract and lure relevant top speakers, topical speakers, people that genuinely want to hear about what is happening on our patch for reasons of you know, either public information or, you know, to find out some really good new and motivational things that are happening here. And, you know, I'm sure you'll agree from, you know, I think Louise, you've appeared yourself, we've had Margot, Nick's obviously, Nick's had a few spots, and we've Margot James, we've tried to create some continuity in getting the message across about all the good things that are great about Coventry and Warwickshire. So that would be my third role. I have one other role, but I'll wait till somebody else asks me, that I will give you my view on what that is.
I think that was a brilliant answer, and I wanted you to say that. I think reputationally, CWLEP across the UK is well, as you've already said, is high performing, but one of the best local enterprise partnerships. And one of the reasons for that is, throughout, I have seen our local enterprise partnership take that whole private sector side very, very seriously. And yes, Paul, as you say, for the benefits of our members on our call today, I go along to the LEP board as an observer. We have a seat on the board with the FSB, which is Sean, who, as you say, chairs the SME group. And yes, I sit on the subsidiary board of the Growth Hub. And we all work really well together, don't we, collaboratively, because we get it. We get that, you know, we are roots and branches, that we have to have those roots and branches into our community, for me, the business community, in order to move Cov Warwickshire anywhere, really, in terms of moving forward. So that was a great answer. I've got another question that's come in. Somebody just wondered, well, how are you funded? So you've talked about some of the great things that we've done, and actually some of the things we'd like to do across Coventry and Warwickshire. It could be infrastructure, it could be some humongous winning projects, such as you say, battery technology, electrification. But what about your money? Where does your money come from?
Okay, I mean, Nick will add to this, I'm sure, but we're an interesting construct, and, you know, I'm not going to make any apology for this. Kind of stolen it really from probably the two Martins, Martin Reeves and Martin Yardley. But, you know, it's a strange setup. We are a private public sector board. We are a construct of government, but we're a private sector board, in effect discharged with spending public money. So we're a publicly funded body. That said, you know, we have a massive support from our private sector directors in terms of in-kind leverage. So that is, we count that very much as a component of how we are funded, because without those private sector representatives, we would not be able to perform the function of our board. So in theory, we have a payout from our host agency in government, which is BEIS and MHCLG. We're a very small team in our own right, both executive wise for the LEP and for the Growth Hub. That is predominantly funded through our annual payout from government, which constitutes something like £500,000 a year. But we also are very, very pleased and very grateful for other contributions made by partners, predominantly local authorities, who subscribe to the Growth Hub, and also make some in-kind contributions to the costs of the executive, and that's local authorities and one of the universities also. So it's an interesting funding model. We've managed to survive it, and I remember back in the day when we first set up, we used to have a slide that we put up, which basically was an empty, almost like toilet pot that went under your bed, and you can imagine the phrase that was used by my predecessors, that we didn't have much money, but basically we started off with a 25k capacity fund, and you were expected to self-fund. Over time, we've obviously changed in terms of our status. We're a company limited by guarantee, you know, follow all the corporate governance, and obviously we are the beneficiary and the discharge of a significant amount of public funding. So we basically follow Section 151 local authority rules and the way in which we sort of spend money, and that money is local growth fund, growing places. We've had regional growth fund, a number of other small grants. So we have to basically follow and comply with local authority expenditure, but that works really well. We've got brilliant relationship with Coventry Council. They're our accountable body, and you know, I think given everything that we have done through the board and the decisions that the board make through the programme delivery board, you know, it's not surprising that we've had these exemplar findings from government around our performance, because the guys on the PDB board around funding decisions do not let anything get through. You know, they are, and again, you know, I know Nick will want to make that point well, but you know, it is genuinely thanks to the challenge and the good relations that we've got with our public sector partners that we are able to illustrate that the money we've been given to do the things that we've said we're going to do, we've done it, and we've achieved it. So I think that's that's testament to it.
I could add something, Louise, to that.
Yes, of course, Nick. Yeah,
you'll remember very well when the coalition government got rid of the regional development agencies and said,
I do.
Blank piece of paper here, form local enterprise partnerships, no rules, no funding,
Yes.
but you'll be able to influence local economic interventions.
Yes.
And of course, the whole public sector, oh my God, I can't do that. And the whole of the entrepreneurial private sector in Coventry and Warwickshire said, come on, bring it on.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to the success of our LEP, is that because of what we've managed to achieve in partnership, and because of the drive that the board has given to the whole organisation of the LEP, and the support it's had from all businesses and yourselves and the FSB, it continues to function very, very well. And that is, and the reason is that we do have influence over what's happening on our patch. It's effective and it's important, and we know what to do. And I perceive, and I'm sure you'll ask this later on, but there is a threat, and that is when public funding is going to be disseminated going forward, will we still, as LEPs, be able to bid for and then spend public funds on our patch? Or will we just be asked to give our opinions and have secondary interventional powers? Because if that happens, then you'll see the private sector board members run for the hills, frankly, because we just won't be interested, because we won't be able to do anything.
Well, I guess in private sector terms, in business terms, we call it value add, don't we? We call it taking what you've got, which hasn't been huge amounts in terms of the actual resourcing of our LEP, and our LEP is one of the most effective in the country. But using that, and then we value add, we leverage in other stuff to help Cov Warwickshire, its local communities. I've got one more detailed question for Paula, because you mentioned it, Paula, and then we're going to come to you, Nick. And the question is around CW Find It, Paula. And just to say, Chamber of Commerce, we're a big fan of CW Find It. We invested in it on behalf of our members, £50,000. I noticed that one of my non-execs, Peter Burns, is on our webinar today, and Peter actually sits on the joint steering committee of CW Find It to make sure that it is really responsive and useful to our local businesses. So somebody's asked about CW Find It, Paula.
Okay, all right, and I'm going to be really honest. It's not my absolute area of expertise, but what we are currently looking at the moment is the multifaceted kind of different aspects of what CW Find It can do, and the big focus for us at the moment, and it is subject to the LEP board and its sub board on around finance and governance, making some underwriting agreement around a particular component around the employment aspect, which is we're dealing with this kind of, we're on a journey. Nobody's actually wanting to quite literally tell you what the numbers are going to be, but we know when the furlough scheme ends that we're going to see a massive spike in redundancy. And what we want from this particular aspect of CW in Find It, aside from all the brilliant things that it can do around advertising opportunities, you know, new contracts, promoting events, etc., is we want it to be a very responsive match vacancy to individuals portal. There's lots of stuff out there. We know that people have got things in place, but it's all fragmented. So what the team are trying to do through the Find It is make that the very simple digital go-to repository that means basically the speed at which a vacancy becomes available, the speed at which somebody registers themselves as either redundant or unemployed, means that the chances of those two colliding and matching are greatly improved because it all lives in one place. And if we can do that one thing through that portal that kind of adds the value, and it's basically like a digital, quick, responsive version of all the brilliant things that we've done before when we've had task force teams around redundancies at Peugeot, you know, Rolls-Royce, we had all of that in place. And if we can do it through Find It, we think we can reduce the amount of time that people are looking for jobs. And that's the key to it, because the minute somebody gets into the redundancy and gets down that route and becomes, you know, in the benefit system, we just want to avoid that. And we think that we've got a real opportunity with that portal to do that.
And the lovely thing about CW Find It is that it is exactly that. It is for the benefit of Cov Warwickshire, businesses and individuals. So anybody can put opportunities on it, or what might be, as you say, vacancies. But the lovely thing is, it was for a change, being able to do something that was all about our sense of place. It was all about Cov Warwickshire, and just being able to do that in sometimes what feels like a much bigger, busier UK economy kind of agenda.
The landscape is very confusing. There's lots of national products. There's lots of initiatives that you can tell people to go and look at Kickstart. You can become an apprentice at any age. When in effect, probably what you're dealing with is, in the very real world, is in effect, people haven't got time for that. They want to know if there's a job they can apply for.
Yes,
That's the bit that our account managers working with our partners can genuinely do. And that's not to duplicate DWP. It's not to duplicate all the other provision. It's to bring it all together.
Add value.
There's another arm, I think, Louise, that can
Nick.
that Find It can do. And I made this point. We had a drop-in board session the other week. And that is to ask employers to be proactive in terms of identifying what skills it is they're looking for. Because what we're going to have is a whole raft of people made redundant who would never have dreamt they were going to be at the beginning of this year. And they are highly skilled people, but they've got the wrong skills. And they're not going to know what it is they need to retrain in. And the guys providing all the opportunities in further education and higher education don't know what to teach unless the employers tell them. So I think it's really important through the Find It portal that we actually have some proactive input from employers saying, look, we're expanding. We've got this job this week, this job next week, but you know, looking 6 months down the line, we can see ourselves coming back to recruit more. And these are the type of people we're going to be looking for. So people can actually plan how to get another job. And that's really important info, I think.
Yeah, no, and that's spot on, Nick. And I will take that to heart, because it's a role that we have to play, isn't it, as well as everybody as a Chamber of Commerce, to be saying to our employers, you know, come on, I know it's difficult, particularly at this moment in time, but if you think about the future and you think about the kind of individual skills that you're going to need in your business, then tell the world, tell the locality, so that as you say, Nick, people can start to be ready for that, skill up for that, and then have the opportunity to apply for jobs in what will definitely be a new world in many ways. So Nick, I'm going to come to you now. Tell us why on earth you decided to become the chair. Paula's laughing. To become the chairman of our local enterprise partnership, although we will be eternally grateful, and it has had some pretty amazing chairs, I have to say. Tell us a little bit about your business background, and tell us what you think success looks like.
Yes, so I'm the fourth chair of the Coventry Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership. Amazingly, 3 of those come from Stratford district, from Stratford, and 2 of us from the same village. So there's a lot of nepotism going on here, and I think that's a wonderful thing. No, I can assure you, it's pure coincidence. But yeah, my name, for those who don't know me, my name's Nick Abell. I've been around in Coventry and Warwickshire for quite a significant period of time. I was educated not in Warwickshire, but just in an adjoining county. Barring 4 years spent as a newly qualified solicitor down in London, I've spent my entire working life in this patch, starting off as a young trainee solicitor in 1977, so I've been around a long time. I've been a lawyer for all of that time, a real estate lawyer. I've been with Wright Hassell, Warwickshire's leading law firm, for the entirety of that time. I rose to senior partner. I've not been a partner now for a couple of years, but I'm still chairman of Wright Hassell. So why have I taken on the chair of the LEP? Well, Louise, I thought I needed more jobs than you'd got. I became a board director, private sector board director, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. Through that process, I became Jonathan Browning's vice chair. And when the pandemic hit, Jonathan was due to retire on the 31st of March. We twisted his arm twice to carry on beyond his term. And he just said, look, I think this is the right time to go. I plan to go. And we were in the process of recruiting a new chair, for which I had not applied, for a whole raft of reasons, which Paula knows. But it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to interview anybody. And so I said I'd become interim chair, and that's very quickly turned into being chair. I know how long that's going to last, but I'm not telling anybody else. So that's why I'm chairman. I have a number of other roles, which I think sort of help me understand a number of sectors. I'm a trustee of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in Stratford-on-Avon, and I'm a trustee of quite a significant private charity that invests in the agricultural and horticultural sector, especially in research, development and innovation in those sectors. I'm chairman of Stratford Cricket Club, which is the hardest job of all. And I enjoy the variety. I love meeting people and I love getting involved in things. This last few months has been an incredibly difficult time. And I was just thinking back, Louise, to the way you introduced this session, and talking about confidence is key, and talking about a contracting economy, talking about unemployment, and Paula going on and telling us, the impact that we're going to have on our patch when furlough unwinds. Tony Jefferson, the leader of Stratford District Council, said the other day that, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, 43% of the working population of Stratford District that went into the pandemic in jobs was still on furlough.
Yes.
Well, that is a really concerning number. And I know the SBT is one, the Royal Shakespeare Company is another, who are still going through cost reduction programs that are mind-boggling to look at, because their income's just gone from up here to down there overnight. And there's no way that that's going to change for months and months and months. So, there are some serious issues coming down the track at us, but it's very easy to be gloomy about it all. But I think if you look around, there's always somebody worse off than we are. I was talking to one of the partners at Wright Hassell this morning, who's doing an international job, and he was on a conference call with a lawyer in Switzerland and a lawyer in one of the South American countries, and I won't tell you which one, and they were just comparing notes as to how bad it was on your patch, and he said, the poor bloke in South America was complaining about absolutely everything, and he said it was so incredibly gloomy. You just got to look around the world, and are we the worst in the world? Of course we're not. And I think back as well. I'm that flipping old that I can remember. I was at school when we had the 3-day week, when the army were collecting all the refuse in the streets because the local services weren't working. When we were called the sick man of Europe. And just to remind people who think that the current restrictions are bad, it was when landlords used to call last orders at 10:20 at night and didn't open up at all on a Sunday. So, we've been in bad places, this country, before, and we've got out of it. And I think if you look at Coventry and Warwickshire in that context and where we are at the moment, it's going to be bad for jobs. It is going to be bad. But we have to keep working at what we're good at. We have to accept that we are in a different place to where we were before. You can you can crow till the cows come home about our success as a LEP over the last decade, and then, you know, what we've managed to attract to this region, all the stats about increased GVA and all this sort of stuff. It's brilliant, but we've gone backwards, and we've gone backwards because some of our sectors that we thought were incredibly resilient, you know, culture, tourism, hospitality, higher education, automotive, they've been hitting the solar plexus, frankly, and some worse than others. And, you know, this is a real problem for us. So we are going to have to reset, and we're going to have to help those sectors come back if we can, and if we can't, we need to get them to look at how they can change. I mean, some of the things the RSC are working on, I can't talk about some of them, are just mind-bogglingly refreshing to see a, you know, an arts company, you know, do things, that even contemplate the things they're contemplating, is fabulous. And a bit like, you know, the high streets in towns, this was all coming anyway.
Yeah,
all of these changes were coming anyway. We just had to step on the accelerator pedal.
Yes.
And so, you know, I see my time as chair of the LEP going forward, and this board's time as board of the LEP, as being a time where we can help people achieve all of that. We have the ear of government, we have the ear of the combined authority through various forums. I've never met so many MPs and ministers as I have over the last couple of years. And I think they listen, actually, because I think they listen because they don't really know what to do. So
I think we're very lucky in Coventry, Warwickshire. We have got a pretty impressive set of MPs who do listen. Yes, we have. We have.
Yeah, and you know, that's good. And so, and you know, you get to talk to them, I do, and we can influence. And there have been a number of examples where, you know, clearly our influence has come to play. We are still bashing away at an investment in the sectors which we're really good at, and a lot of that's in R&D. I mean, you'll all be aware of, you know, the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre, which is now up and running. I'm a non-exec board director of that, because that's the LEP helped achieve that coming, and one of the prerequisites was we had to have a board director on that board to make sure they did things properly. When I was elected to do that by the LEP board, I did point out that I got a grade 6 at physics O level, which should disqualify me on 2 counts. 1, I'm too old, and 2, I don't know the first thing about batteries. So I think I'm probably ideally suited for the job. But, you know, the UK BIC, alongside Warwick Manufacturing Group, alongside the leading automotive players that we host, and not just Jaguar Land Rover, you know, we've got many others. We've just attracted Lotus to come and bring their R&D position to Wellesbourne. There'll be 157 people coming over from Norfolk, you know, for that. They've come here for a reason. They've come here because this is where it happens in this country, in R&D, and they want to be close to the right people and the right facilities. Paula mentioned earlier that we're still putting an awful lot of effort into securing government backing to build a gigafactory. That's a hard task.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a hard task because wherever that gigafactory is built will thrive, because loads and loads of cars will be manufactured alongside where the batteries are made, and it'll create tens of thousands of jobs, and that essentially is what the LEP is all about. The LEP is about creating jobs through economic investment in our patch. That was the original reason we were set up. That's why it was we need to keep bashing at. We don't need to forget other sectors though either that are suddenly struggling. We need to help them. But you can put all these things together. You can. I had a conversation. You, Paula, mentioned Margot James. I talked to Margot James about, can WMG help somebody like the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust take Shakespeare's birthplace to the world rather than waiting for the world to come to Shakespeare's birthplace? She said, of course we can. You know, that's what it's all about. It's about all of that technology, and you know, that may well happen. Who knows? So there are things that we can do as a business community that I think we can continue to make a difference with. So I think the one thing I would say though, and we've touched on this, are we going to be able to achieve that? we will achieve it if we stay united, if we stay as a proper partnership, Coventry and Warwickshire, you know, as part of the reset. And, you know, listening to what Paula has to say, you might wonder why we need a chairman and a board of directors, because our executive could just run the show, frankly. But you kind of try and guide and push in certain directions. And I've said from the outset, we need to consider Coventry and Warwickshire as one word, because it is. You know, we go into bat as one place. We celebrate each other's successes, whether we're in Coventry or in Warwickshire, whether we're in North Warwickshire or Stratford-on-Avon. And long may that continue. And that's why we're so strong, and that's why we'll succeed. There are a number of threats out there that could put some holes into that, but we have to get rid of those threats, and we have to make sure we stay that strong. And kind of that's a bit about my job, I think, as chairman.
So a couple of the questions that are coming in, Nick, sorry for interrupting, and apologies for the background noise now. It's actually the rain.
Yeah.
So I apologise for that, anybody on our webinar. In terms of a couple of the questions that are coming in, they are sector-specific questions. So that's interesting, isn't it? That much of what we've already talked about so far, we've been able to refer to specific sectors. And I just wonder whether, Nick, at times you feel that you're trying to be, as an enterprise partnership, I'd certainly know how you feel, because I think this is how we feel at times as a Chamber of Commerce, you try to be all things to all men, or do you feel that you and we can make a difference with sectors? I noticed, for example, Helen's on the call from Shakespeare's England, and we know for a fact that the worst hit, as you both say, of this pandemic has been hospitality, tourism and leisure. And you know, if I've had a nightmare throughout, my recurring nightmare has been about those mid-sized businesses in that particular sector that we haven't really been able to help. I mean, they've obviously accessed the job retention scheme from the government, which was fabulous, but they were too big for local authority cash grants. They probably had to have a begging bowl if they got any review of their local business rates. And we're up against this every day, aren't we, really? Those sectors that we're able to help a little bit more, and those sectors that we know are still really struggling out there. But how do you feel? Do you feel all things to all men, or do you feel that you can actually make differences sometimes with sector specific stuff?
I don't think you can be all things to all men. I don't think you'll achieve anything. When we did the strategic economic plan within the LEP, we deliberately restricted the areas that we invested in into three. We just had three sectors: advanced manufacturing and engineering, digital, and culture and tourism, and that was it. Because if you try to go beyond that, you just can't do it. I mean, but of course, what you're doing is you're helping everybody, aren't you? You are, if you are pouring all your eggs there into three baskets, then all the other baskets will look after themselves. And I mean, I can always remember in business, we kept, you know, you keep having these business plans, don't you? And you talk about, you know, yeah, I can't remember, we had a right hassle. We had sort of marketing, custom clients, marketing, I don't know, service levels, all those sorts of things. And of course, the one that anybody ever looked at was profits. That's all you ever look at. And I just kept saying, look, if you get the others right, that one's fine. If you get the others wrong, you forget the profits column. It just won't happen. So you work on in a region like ours. You work on those sectors where you've got strengths, those sectors where you can differentiate yourself from the rest of the world, and you concentrate on that, and you try to attract investments from outside to make your patch stronger economically, and then all of the other sectors will thrive as a result of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I do believe though there's a bit of a nuance at the moment, which is what I touched on earlier about skills, which is, you know, if you've got a whole load of very talented people in certain sectors who are losing their jobs and who are not going to be able to just move geographically to go and get them, because this is nationwide. You know, theatres are shut nationwide, museums are shut nationwide, and that's not going to change. So, you know, an actor, a curator, and people like this, they're not going to suddenly be able to move house and go and find a job somewhere else. It's not going to happen. So what we need to do is encourage our successful sectors to try and help those that are currently down and make sure they're not out. because those will come back. They'll all come back. But you might watch the theatre in a different way. And so I think that the successful sectors need to be encouraged, and we can help do this, to help established businesses who are set in their ways and being very successful, who suddenly had the rug pulled out from underneath them, to look at their business in a different way and say, well, look, I used to deliver this and I was really successful.
Yes.
And someone can come along and say, well, you can still deliver that, but you've got to do it differently. Yes. And you can still be successful. And we've got that ability, haven't we? We have got so much ability to do that with the expertise we have in this patch, and we're a 5G test bed. So, you know, all of this stuff, we are going to move, if we get it right, we could move very, very rapidly into the next age of how people do business. So that, I hope that answers the question.
It does, because what it says to us, like any of us who are running businesses, you know, we have that overarching view of the world, of our world and the wider world, but at the end of the day we also have to have focus, and we have to back winners. We can't at all times help all people. At times you have to back the winners, really. And the one thing I think, if anything, and I know everybody says this now, but if anything we've learned from this pandemic is the word resilience, and I hope many more businesses have sort of understood that a little bit more out there in terms of what resilience actually means moving forward, and particularly cash is king, and learning how, as businesses move forward, they really need to think about how they build cash, and they build their resilience, and they diversify their products or their services. They think about export as well as domestic markets, anything and everything possible to build resilience into their businesses, so that if ever we're caught out again, more of our businesses survive than what might otherwise do so. I've got a question on skills, and it's because you've mentioned skills once or twice, both of you, and the question that has come in is around you know, does the enterprise partnership feel that really it's got any influence on skills, when some employers still believe that what we outcrop from further education and higher education isn't always what's needed in business? Although I think I'm with you a little bit, Nick, in terms of it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Employers have to tell the FE and HE, sorry, further education, higher education, what we need to then outcrop the right kind of people. But what about skills? Do you feel you've got any influence on that agenda at all, Nick, Paula?
I think we do, because one of our board members is Marion Plant, and I've not met a force of nature quite like Marion.
No, scary.
And she's outstanding, you know, she keeps bringing us back to this, and the lobbying that we do through that is intense, and I think the answer is yes, but to your point as well, perhaps the biggest influence we can have is getting our employers to tell us, to tell government, to tell the skills providers what it is they want. I once read a book called The Art of Change, or something like that, and the bloke just said, if you want to change something, you have to communicate till it hurts. And it's very, very true. And I was talking to Martin Reeves. I know he feels very strongly about this, about trying to, the levelling up agenda and trying to help disadvantaged kids get into employment. He said, you have to keep trying again and again and again, and you must never give up. I remember do you remember when Dennis Short announced 100 apprenticeships in 100 days or something?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
Wright Hassel advertised for 2 apprenticeships at a law firm, which was unheard of. And you know, do you know we have 1 applicant? And that applicant turned up for 1 day. She just didn't appear to be very interested, and certainly didn't have the skills. And she went home and never came back. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, Wright Hassel at the time should not have accepted that they only got 1 applicant. They should have gone out and proactively tried to get more. And with that particular girl, they should have sent somebody out to go and get her the second day and bring her back in, and keep bringing her back in until they'd shown her what the opportunity was and got the best out of her, not in an aggressive way, but in a way which said, we value you, we want to help you. You have, and that's really hard to do when you're busy. And you're trying to, if you really want to level things up and you want to help people who need the skills, you have to do it till it hurts. You really do. So I think perhaps we can help with that.
Yeah.
Paula?
My only other point I would add on skills, and again, it's a bit of a play, and I think we do this well, and I know all three of us are on the EIG call, the mayor's call every Thursday. The skills kind of agenda from government as well as employers, and understandably having that complexity of understanding what their requirements are, but the provision through DFE or through you know, a higher education route, and the policy landscape for skills is fractured and broken. And if we could in some way or shape or form have more control over what it is that we can offer on our patch, with more powers and more autonomy over what we spend money on, I think that would help. That would certainly help with employer engagement, because at the moment the products are too remote, and the products I feel are very nationally imposed, and what you actually need is tailored products on your own patch that employers have co-designed, and you don't get that with national products. What you actually get is, we've done our homework, one size fits all, here's the provider, and you know, go and make it work. And I think that's a fault with the system.
Yes, just had some lovely input from a lady called, I believe it's another Paula, it is Paula Griffin on the call. Thank you, Paula. And Paula's just commented that she absolutely agrees with what we've been talking about when it comes to skills, the need for employers to be vocal about what they want in the future. And she was commenting that she's got some really lovely stories of how the very best of employers do exactly that. And you must let us have those stories, Paula, and we'll feature them as some good news stories and some good case studies as to actually how to do it. Very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, I'm going to come back to the Gigafactory, and that's because I've got a question that's just literally cropped up. Are we confident? Is it a competitive? I guess it's a competitive process, isn't it? Are we up against the north again, trying to get something like this? Are we confident, Nick, Paula? What do we think?
Look, I've seen Andrew's question, and I can't give a straight answer to that.
I can't see the question.
But I look, all I can say on the Gigafactory is this: the government are going to get behind a or more than one Gigafactory. If this country wants to compete in the world of electric cars, then it has to have one or two, probably three or four, I think, from what I understand.
Yes.
But of course, you know, we've been pushing very hard. Andy Street's been pushing very hard for a Gigafactory in the West Midlands. The likelihood is that the government will back the one that looks economically the best for the government. To be honest with you, they will back it, but they can't back it to the hilt. And so, to actually win a Gigafactory, you have to put a proper economic case for it.
Yes.
Does the fact that we have everything that you could possibly need to have a Gigafactory, except for a seaport, in Coventry and Warwickshire help us? It ought to.
Yeah.
What I think we've got to find, and you know, Martin Yardley, our chief exec at the LEP, who does an inordinate amount of work trying to pull these sorts of things off. He talks to me quite regularly about where we are with that. All I would say is that I think that British Volt, that Andrew's mentioned in his question, is a little bit of a red herring. They've signed a is it statement of intention or something with the Welsh government, and want to build a Gigafactory in South Wales where nobody builds cars. So I kind of think that economically they could do it there for cheap as chips. But is that the right place to put it? I don't know.
As you say, Nick, we just have to hope that they see sense, that government can see the sense of where exactly to place this Gigafactory, which obviously, in our view, should be here. And I get it that sometimes they want to follow, forgive me for saying, but want to follow the unemployment, they want to follow the job need. And I get that in terms of equality and inequalities. Of course, they have to be mindful of that. But to make this a success, it needs to be tied into an area like this, where, as you guys have already talked about, you know, we have the catapult health centres, we have the Warwick manufacturing groups, we have the manufacturing technology centres, we have the academies that are looking at young engineers. And yeah, we can only hope, Andrew, that they get that and they see that this is the place to come. Right, we've just got 1 minute to go, so I'm going to come back very, very quickly. This is, guys, we think our LEP adds value. We're not complacent. For anybody on this call that thinks we are, we're not, but we think our LEPs add value. Are they here to stay? Who knows, I guess.
Who knows, I think, is the right answer.
There's supposed to be a devolution white paper come out probably this week. That's been shelved to next year.
Oh, has it? Okay.
We've just got to keep going, Louise. I think we have to assume that
we've got a job to do, I guess.
Yeah, we've got a job to do. We've got to keep doing.
We'll push on regardless. If we're not called a LEP, we'll be called something else, is what I normally say.
Yes. So to finish, I'm just mindful of something that was said today, and it's not party political, although it happened to be said at a party political conference, and you know that the one that's happening today, but it did resonate with me, to be fair, and it was that understanding the challenge in the room, being that we have COVID-19 to face up to, we have a climate change, a green agenda to face up to, and then we have this whole concept of trade and free trade, and the opportunity to trade, as I said earlier, to trade ourselves out of COVID-19 and through Brexit and to the other side. Back to confidence. I think Cov Warwickshire can do that. I think that we've got the businesses, the sectors, the diversity to do exactly that. We are lucky that we started from a very strong playing field, didn't we, really? We had such a strong foundation, again, without being complacent for any of our delegates on the webinar today, but we had such a strong foundation. All of the KPIs told us that, the performance measures in Cov Warwickshire, that I just feel confident that that if we can't do it, I'd be surprised who can. But any last words to you two guys? I'm with you.
Make it in Coventry and Warwickshire.
Yeah, Coventry and Warwickshire.
I share your confidence, Louise. I share your confidence, and we just have to take the bad things with the good things. But we'll keep fighting. I love this area. I think it's a great part of the country to be living and doing business in. I wouldn't want to move.
Thank you. Well, thank you both. You have certainly matched the amazing array of speakers that we've had on our policy hours throughout COVID-19. It was lovely to get the chance, actually, at last to sit down and just have a conversation with our enterprise partnership. I'm sorry if you didn't see all the questions coming up. I should have told you we have a secret mechanism going on here, which is that Sean sends me questions through on my phone where people might be asking him questions that don't necessarily show up on the chat. So that wasn't about curveballs, it was that I was getting other messages. So but you answered them all brilliantly. Thank you so much for our delegates who've been with us again today on Policy Hour. I hope to see you all very, very soon. And if you've got any queries and any questions, you know where to come, either to Nick, to Paula, or myself, and we are here to help. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. We just leave.